Did you know that every time you order takeout in a plastic container, you could be getting more than just your meal? And no, I'm not talking about an extra side of fries. I'm talking about something you can't see. Something that could be making it harder for you to lose weight, feel energized, or even stay healthy. I hadn't really paid much attention to it either. I was eating clean, working out, and doing all the right things. But the progress felt sluggish. Things just weren't moving as quickly as I had hoped. Then I started looking beyond just my workouts and the food I was eating. And what I found? It shocked me. But first, just a quick heads up. The information I'm sharing here is for your education and entertainment. It's not medical advice, nor is it a substitute for consulting with a healthcare professional. Also, some links in the video description are affiliate links, so if you buy through them, it helps support the channel, but at no extra cost to you. Now, on with the show. Let's be honest. Losing weight sounds simple, right? Eat better, move more, and boom, results. Except real life doesn't work that way. When I started my journey back in July 2022, I was 148.6 pounds, and I had a goal to get back into peak shape and step on the competitive fitness stage again. But life, it had other plans. I had 2 weeks of travel, one in Miami, one in Bali. Then came Thanksgiving, Christmas, and all the holiday indulgences that are basically unavoidable unless you're living under a rock. Oh, and let's not forget the skipped workouts, last-minute schedule changes, and days where I just wasn't feeling it. And yet, I didn't just maintain, I made progress. By January 2023, I was down to 125.8 pounds. That's a drop of almost 23 pounds. And it wasn't because I was perfect with my eating, exercise, sleep, self-care. Far from it. But I started focusing on something I hadn't really considered before. Instead of just looking at what I was eating and how I was working out, I started paying attention to something else. What my food was touching. What else was making its way into my body? That shift, reducing my exposure to hidden toxins, changed everything. The weight started coming off. My blood pressure dropped back to normal. And this is big, without the need for medication anymore. Today, I'm breaking it all down, the steps I took, so you can start making changes that actually move the needle for your health too. So, what exactly are these toxins? And why do they have such a powerful effect on our bodies? Let's take a closer look. Most people focus on what they eat, but what about what your food is touching? What your skin is touching? The materials in your home, the containers, the cookware, even the water you drink, can expose you to chemicals that disrupt hormones, fuel inflammation, and slow metabolism. Here's what I found. First, many plastics contain bisphenol A. You may know it as BPA. This and other chemicals can leach into your food, especially when heated. These are endocrine disruptors or hormone disruptors, meaning they mess with your hormones and metabolism, making it harder to lose weight. Second, if you've been using traditional non-stick pans, they likely contain per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS for short. We also call them forever chemicals. These compounds don't break down in the body. They're around forever. And they've been linked to weight gain, metabolic issues, and even high blood pressure. Third, microplastics. These tiny plastic particles, less than 5 millimeters in size, are created when larger plastic items slowly break down over time due to exposure to sunlight, heat, and environmental wear and tear. Think about all the plastic water bottles, food packaging, and grocery bags out there. Over time, they degrade into microplastics that make their way into our environment. Microplastics are everywhere. They've been found in drinking water, fresh produce, seafood, and in the air we breathe. Scientists have even detected them in human blood, brain, and other organs. In fact, a recent study found that plastic takeout containers leak microplastics into your food, especially when they're heated. And those tiny bits of plastic, they don't just pass through you. The research showed that people with higher plastic exposure had a higher risk of developing congestive heart failure. But the way it happens, that's important to note, because the effects don't stop at heart disease. Scientists believe that once microplastics are inside your body, they can throw off the balance of good and bad bacteria in your gut. And when that balance is off, it triggers inflammation. The same kind of inflammation linked to a sluggish metabolism, weight gain, and yes, even serious heart problems like congestive heart failure. So if you feel like you're doing everything right, but still struggling with bloating, sluggishness, or stubborn weight, could tiny plastic particles be part of the problem? It sure made me think twice. That's why I started making some swaps, and little by little, I've noticed a difference. So let me tell you, this wasn't some overnight detox. I didn't throw everything away and start fresh. I made these changes gradually so that it didn't feel so time-consuming. Change number 1, plastic-free food storage. I swapped out some of my old plastic food containers for glass or silicone ones. No more plastic leaching into my food. Now, glass storage containers often come with plastic lids, so I looked into alternatives like silicone or bamboo lids that provide a seal without plastic contact. But if plastic lids are your only option, there are still ways to minimize exposure. One simple trick is to place a small sheet of unbleached wax paper between the lid and your food as a barrier. Another option is to leave a little space at the top so your food isn't directly touching the plastic. And here's an important distinction. I only use silicone for cold or room temperature storage. Why? Because while silicone is generally considered safer than plastic, the current research shows that when it's heated to temperatures above 300 degrees Fahrenheit, some silicone may begin to degrade and release compounds into food. Even food-grade silicone can start breaking down at temperatures above 428 degrees Fahrenheit, potentially releasing harmful chemicals. So, when I need to heat something, I stick to glass or ceramic. And if you're using ceramic, here's a checklist for you. First, check labels. Many modern ceramics will say if they're lead or cadmium free. These heavy metals can leach into food, especially when heated, and they've been linked to serious health issues, from kidney and brain damage to cardiovascular problems. Next, be cautious with bright colors like reds and yellows, which can be a sign of toxic heavy metals, especially on older or vintage pieces. Also, when in doubt, test it. If you already own containers that you're concerned about, you can get home lead and cadmium test kits online or at hardware stores. And I've got this tip for more accurate results. Wipe the testing area with vinegar or lemon juice beforehand. The acidity helps draw out any toxic substances that might be there. Finally, inspect for chips or cracks. Not only can they allow the glaze and ceramic materials to leach into your food, but they can harbor bacteria and food particles, contaminating your meal. So, if it's damaged, don't use it. Bottom line, if you're swapping out plastic, ceramic can be a great option. Just be sure it's a safe one. Change number 2, avoid plastic packaging. As I started paying more attention to what my food was stored in, I realized just how many everyday products came in plastic, from food and supplements to skincare. One of the easiest swaps? Avoiding plastic whenever possible. For example, I started buying things like almond butter in glass jars instead of plastic. Oils were another big one. Research has shown that fats can absorb chemicals from plastic over time. I switched to olive oil in glass bottles instead. Even my supplements, things I take daily, my multivitamins, those were often stored in plastic. So I looked for brands that used plastic-free containers whenever I had the option. But it wasn't just about food. Since I was paying attention to what I was putting in my body, I also started thinking about what I was putting on my body. So for my facial creams and body lotions, I looked for brands that were natural and came in plastic-free packaging. That led me to Eti and Face Theory. Their products came in glass jars. If you want to check them out, I've placed links in the description. Now, recently, I've noticed both brands, like most companies, have updated their products and packaging. They are shifting to what are considered more sustainable materials. And then, of course, companies are always balancing factors like cost and consumer preferences as well. One change I've seen is the shift from a glass jar to an aluminum tube for cream products, which is actually a decent alternative to plastic, health-wise, since aluminum isn't known to leach chemicals. And this brings up an important point. Yes, sustainability and ecological impact are important. And yes, there are a lot of factors to weigh when choosing packaging, like transport emissions, recyclability, and durability. But this episode isn't about making the perfect choice across every category. My focus here is on reducing toxin exposure for better health. You get to decide what solutions feel best for you based on your own priorities. Change number 3, water upgrade. You'd think tap water would be safe, at least in developed areas with strict water standards. But here's the thing. Even if your city's water supply is top-notch, your own pipes might be the problem. If they're old, they could be leaching lead or other contaminants right into your drinking water. And that's before we even talk about flooding, industrial runoff, or that lovely springtime bloom of algae. What's actually in your water? The only way to really know is to get it tested by a professional. That's how you'll know exactly what's in it and which filter will give you the right level of protection for your home. Because contaminants like lead, mercury, norovirus, PFAS, microplastics, and more, yeah, they're out there. I used to have one of those plastic pitchers with a built-in filter for my drinking water, which, sure, cleaned the water, but also meant my filtered water was sitting in plastic. So I decided to reduce my exposure to plastic altogether and switched to a glass pitcher and a stainless steel countertop water filter. Change number 4, reusable produce bags. At the grocery store, I used to grab those thin plastic produce bags without thinking twice. But then I started looking at how plastic exposure adds up, and I realized even my produce was spending unnecessary time wrapped in plastic. So I switched to organic cotton mesh bags. But you could choose any natural fiber, like burlap, for example. And as it turns out, there are actually some great benefits to using natural fiber bags. First, the mesh is breathable, so moisture doesn't get trapped, and that helps keep your produce out of a humid environment that makes it spoil faster. Next, it allows ethylene gas to escape. That's the gas that fruits and veggies naturally release as they ripen. When that gas gets trapped, it speeds up the ripening process. But when it can escape, your produce stays fresher longer. Finally, I'm avoiding even more unnecessary plastic exposure, and yes, it also means less plastic waste too. Reusable produce bags like these are a simple change, but they make a meaningful difference for both your food and your health. Simple swap, big impact. Change number 5, the non-toxic cookware swap. Yep, I ditched my old nonstick pans. I started replacing them with safe, non-toxic alternatives. Food tastes better, cleanup is just as easy, and I no longer have to worry about PFAS chemicals messing with my health. Remember, PFAS are those toxins I mentioned earlier, the forever chemicals. PFAS includes toxins like PFOA, PFOS, Gen X, and PTFE. That's a whole lot of letters, but just know they're all forever chemicals. And actually, you're probably familiar with PTFE, but know it as the brand name Teflon. In any case, all of this PFAS, these forever chemicals, have been widely used in nonstick cookware. But when these coatings get scratched, overheated, or wear down, those chemicals can end up in your food. Now, like with other clean or green products, cookware labels can be misleading. It's common to see terms like PFOA free or PTFE free, but that doesn't always mean the product is truly non-toxic. For example, some brands rebrand their PTFE coatings with fancy names while still using the PFOA-free label. But here's the thing. PFOA was already phased out in 2016, so no company can use it anyway. That label is essentially meaningless. This is why I always check for cookware that's truly free of PFAS, not just PFOA. If you still want to use nonstick cookware, and let's be honest, nobody loves scrubbing stuck-on food, here's what to look for when choosing a truly non-toxic option. First, you want a PFAS-free product. No forever chemicals lurking in your food. Second, make sure it's lead-free and cadmium-free. Heavy metals have no place in your kitchen or in your food, more importantly. Next, check for durability and heat resistance. Some nonstick coatings break down at high temperatures, so make sure yours is built to last. When coatings break down, that's when concerns about toxin exposure come up. And finally, look at third-party testing and certifications. Look for brands that meet food safety standards from the FDA or the regulatory body in your country. After researching safer, non-toxic, non-stick cookware, I decided on Green Pan's GP5 collection with Infinite 8 coating. And I've been really impressed. If you want to check it out, look for the link in the description. Here's why I chose it. First, there's no PFAS, no PFOA, no lead, no cadmium. So I'm not cooking with any forever chemicals or toxic heavy metals. Then there's Green Pan's signature Thermalon ceramic coating. Infinite 8 is their most advanced version of this coating, made with multiple layers for extra durability and infused with real diamonds to resist scratches and wear. Next, the body of the pan is specially treated to make it tough, non-reactive, and scratch resistant. So it holds up to real life, even if you stack your pans or use metal utensils. It's also oven safe up to 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Plus, it's dishwasher safe. That said, I still prefer to hand wash mine, and Green Pan recommends that too. Why? Because harsh detergents, high heat, and the banging around in a dishwasher can gradually break down the ceramic coating. And even though the coating is non-toxic, if it starts to wear or scratch, that protective barrier could be compromised. So to keep the surface in great shape and keep your meals protected, hand washing is the safer bet. So now I get to enjoy all the convenience of nonstick cooking without worrying about what's leaching into my food. Now, let's talk about what actually happened when I started making these changes. At first, I wasn't expecting anything dramatic. I figured switching to glass containers and avoiding plastic packaging was a smart move for my health. But I wasn't sure I'd notice much of a difference. But after a few months, my weight started coming off more easily. I felt less bloated and more energized. And here's the big one. My blood pressure finally stabilized to the point where I didn't need medication anymore. It reinforced something I already knew. A healthy lifestyle goes beyond just diet and exercise. Because here's the thing. I developed high blood pressure years ago while I was in peak training shape. I was working out consistently, eating clean, doing all the right things, and I still ended up on medication. So I didn't expect that just getting back into shape would change that. But this time I focused on something I had overlooked before, reducing my exposure to toxins in everyday life. I didn't overhaul everything at once. I just started making more mindful choices, replacing plastic where I could, being thoughtful about what touched my food, what I stored it in, what I put on my skin. And over time, my blood pressure came down. Finally, I no longer needed medication to keep it in check. So, if you feel like you're doing everything right, but still not seeing the results you want, this might be the missing piece. Now, I want to be clear. This episode is not a complete guide to remove every toxin from your life. To live in today's modern society, it's almost impossible to do. This is not even a full list of everything I've done. These are just a few of the changes that really moved the needle for me. And my hope is that by sharing them, I might spark some sort of change for you. Not every change I made was a perfect solution. And I'm not saying that my way is the only path to results. But I do know this. I feel healthier now. I'm happier at the weight that I am now. And I was able to come off blood pressure meds for the first time since I was diagnosed years ago. So, if this inspired you, my challenge is simple. Start with one small step. Maybe it's replacing one nonstick pan. Maybe it's getting cotton mesh bags for your produce shopping. Maybe it's swapping out a few of your plastic food containers. You're the best judge of what works for your life. And small, intentional choices can make a big difference over time. If this resonated with you, let me know in the comments. What's one change you're ready to try? And if you found this helpful, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. I'm Dr. Venus, MD on call, reminding you to stay fit, be happy,